Filing for divorce is a big step that somebody can take. And in order to be prepared for that, you really need to do your homework and understand what is all at stake. The common issues are you have assets and you have debt, but you also potentially could have children at stake as part of this divorce. So it's really important for you to know the full extent of what the marital assets are, what the marital estate looks like before getting into the divorce process itself. It's really easy to file the initial pleadings and start the case, but what's really hard to do is figure out and contemplate sort of what your goals are as part of this proceeding. So it's really important for you to do some homework before filing, not only on yourself so you understand your whole marital estate, but also on who you're going to hire and who you want to hire to represent you and help walk you through this process. The divorce process itself can actually be very simple. It doesn't have to be this traumatic and crazy experience that you see about in movies and TV shows. Just about everybody you know knows somebody who's been through this process, and they either had a good experience or they had a terrible experience, and either way they're going to give you some sort of advice. What I'm telling you here is that each case, though, is individual. And regardless of the facts and the thought that this case may look like this case, the reality is every one of them is different. And that's why you need to handle every one of them differently as the attorney. A divorce can be anywhere from 60 some days to as long as a year or even longer. As the attorney, the faster we can get you through this process, the better off not only you are, it saves you a lot of money, it saves you a lot of time, it saves you a lot of stress. But the process itself, the fastest you can possibly get through the process is approximately 61 days. That's somewhat a rare occurrence, but it does happen. Even if the parties are in complete agreement on stuff, sometimes the process can take a little bit longer, closer to 6 months. In a case where there's a lot of assets or a lot of debt, or just generally a high conflict divorce, those issues are going to likely take the case out closer to the year or longer. Divorce process itself is a lot easier when the parties are open to settlements. If the parties are both unwilling to settle and require extensive litigation to the full effect that you have to have a trial, then at least in Nebraska, those cases can take upwards of 18 months, partly and due because of the court docket and just trying to get on the case schedule, not just the schedule for the court, but it's also trying to fit it into the attorney's schedule. That process can be really long. It can be really hard for the clients because while it may go fast for the attorney working for it, it's a day-by-day thing for the clients. You want to make sure that when you go through the litigation process that your attorney is really prepared, that knows your case really well, and has had the time to devote to making sure that they can fight for the outcome that you're really looking for. The length of the process really is determined by how much tension is involved between the two parties. In the scenarios where the parties are not fighting with each other neck and neck, they just realize that they're maybe not a great couple married and just want to be divorced. Those cases, it can be over in a couple of months and are relatively inexpensive. Cases where the parties are really mad, maybe it's an abrupt separation at this point or an abrupt filing, those cases can take longer. They can take upwards of a year because emotions are still really high from whatever the triggering event was for us to find ourselves in this scenario. Cases where the triggering event may have occurred and the parties have had some time to think about it, those can be resolved usually fairly fast. High conflict divorces can take upwards of over a year, sometimes 2 years. And it's not really anybody's fault for that necessarily on the attorney side or the court side. There's civil procedure issues you need to follow, and certain things just have a certain amount of days that have to click off the calendar before you can actually move to the next step. In addition to all that, you have to find a date that's convenient for the court and fit into the court's calendar as well. The length of time that the divorce takes is really primarily up to the clients. And how much tension is there, how much conflict is there, and how many assets are there. If the parties come into the scenario, or if the client can be prepared and know really what they want and are focused on that and not focused on sort of the non-essential items, then you can get to the divorce a lot faster. At Husker Law, we always strive for the client to be happy, right? So what we want to do is give them the best representation that we can, but that doesn't always mean that we're going to tell them everything that they want. Part of our job as the attorneys is to tell them what is going to happen, not what they want to happen. That can be a hard reality for some people. So it's important to go into it with an open mind and understand that if you want your divorce to be done in a relatively short period of time, there's going to have to be some negotiation and some movement by both parties. And if everybody goes into that situation with the same sort of understanding, it doesn't have to be this giant life experience. It can just be an experience that you get through and get to the other side as quickly as possible. Nebraska is a no-fault divorce state. What that means is that neither party has to be at fault for the failure of the marriage. Years ago, decades ago, most states, if not all states, required one party to prove fault of the marriage in order for a judge to grant the marriage to be dissolved. With the changing attitudes of culture and sort of the shifting momentum, the way our society views marriage at this point, most states have moved to sort of how Nebraska is now, where it's a no-fault state. So things like infidelity or abandonment or abuse and things that would have otherwise carried a lot of weight when it came to a divorce may not carry much weight or may not be relevant whatsoever in your case. At this point, for a no-fault divorce state, basically, if one party wants out of the marriage and wants to dissolve the marriage, they're going to get the marriage dissolved. It doesn't require consent from the other party, and it doesn't require them to prove any fault. If you've come to the unfortunate realization that divorce appears to be a very likely outcome, and therapy hasn't worked or other means of fixing and repairing the marriage just doesn't seem to be happening, it's probably time to consult an attorney. Consulting an attorney doesn't mean you have to hire them. It doesn't mean that you have to put them on retainer. It doesn't mean that you have some massive financial output. Simply just to go speak with an attorney about your situation. Like most things in life, it's great to go into it with a plan. And that plan may be to wait longer, but that plan may also be to file now. And the only way for somebody that hasn't been through this a lot to know is to talk to an attorney who's been through it. At Husker, I've been through it thousands of times at this point. And so it's really important for you as the client to know that if divorce is becoming a potential option for your guys' marriage, you should speak with an attorney sooner rather than later. A prepared client is a more successful client. And knowing sort of the ins and outs as you're making that decision is a lot more helpful than shooting from the hip and not knowing exactly what you're doing. Making missteps along the way will only cost you more money and potentially more stress and anxiety along the way. Being prepared and speaking to an attorney before things get too bad with you and your spouse is really the best option for you. If you find yourself walking down the path of potential divorce, it's important to understand the divorce process itself and all the pitfalls and different ways that different outcomes can be achieved. For that, you should call Husker Law or visit huskerlaw.com to schedule your free case evaluation.